Hello and welcome to the Other Minds podcast. I'm Joseph Bohigian. Other Minds, founded in 1992 in San Francisco by Charles Amerkanian and Jim Newman, is devoted to championing the most original voices in new and experimental music. On season 5 of the podcast, we're talking with a range of composers, performers, and authors across the field of new music, including the featured composers from the 30th Other Minds Festival, which will take place October 8th to 11th, 2026, at the Brava Theater in San Francisco. You're listening to Sharawagi Blues by today's guest, David Rothenberg. David Rothenberg is a composer, clarinetist, philosopher, and author of several books on animal songs, including Why Birds Sing, which was turned into a documentary by the BBC in 2006. He has more than 40 albums under his own name and has worked with scientists to decode the mockingbird song and written stories on cicada music for the New York Times and whale music for National Geographic. Rothenberg will travel to the Bay Area to talk about making music with animals at Other Minds, the Nature of Music series on April 16th, 2026 at the David Brower Center in Berkeley. Rothenberg will also give the West Coast premiere of his work 11 Paths to Animal Music, which features recordings of natural environments from his travels. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thanks for inviting me.
When scientists study animal vocalizations, how do they begin to figure out what an animal is doing? Is it communication or is it performance?
Yeah, what is the difference between communication and performance? Communication, covers like any interaction between one person and another, one creature and another. But performance is, I think, a subset of communication, speaking as a philosopher. We like to define stuff. Performance is a kind of communication where an animal or a human, they gets up and they do something. They have to follow certain rules. They have to usually do it with a beginning, middle, and end. Usually it has some emotional weight, some kind of performative rules. And this kind of communication is a lot closer to music than it is to language.
When it comes to animal song, do animals have an aesthetic sense? Is there learned taste by individual animals, or is it genetically encoded? And can animals have bad taste?
Well, this is the thing that really Charles Darwin was very interested in. He is famous for the theory of natural selection, that organisms evolve not with a purpose, but with a direction, so that species evolve traits that are useful, pragmatic, help them survive in a kind of adaptive manner. Evolutionary adaptation. But pretty soon, Darwin noticed things that were hard to explain as being useful. Things like the tails of peacocks and other pheasants, birds of paradise. He wrote to Asa Gray, a botanist, "The peacock's tail really makes me sick." Because he couldn't explain it as being useful. It's just not a useful thing. You have to lug around this huge tail, you can barely fly, and then you unfurl it. And it's like ridiculous. It's so excessive. How could this be adaptive? How could it be useful? So in The Descent of Man, which has at least 2 chapters just about birds, he said, look, some animals have a natural aesthetic sense. Birds have a natural aesthetic sense. That's why they have evolved beautiful feathers, beautiful plumage, beautiful songs, beautiful dances, beautiful behaviors. Beauty evolves. Beauty has evolved. And if you wound back evolution millions of years, it would evolve a whole different direction. It wouldn't evolve like this.
So what does that tell us about animal cultures and the boundaries or lack of boundaries between human cultures and animal cultures?
Well, you add something a little different there because evolution applies to like traits that pass down from generation to generation. Culture is what a group of animals human animals or other kinds of animals, they evolve together as a kind of group. One group behaves like this, another group behaves like that. And you're in California. Berkeley is a center of the development of cultural anthropology, where anthropologists and others try to talk about in what sense the biological ideas of evolution might apply to culture. And there's been a lot of debate about that. But in recent years, something somewhat radical has been accepted by many, many scientists, which is that animals also have cultures. And this is most famously visible, perhaps, in the senses of killer whales, orcas. Now, orcas in Chile, on the coast of South America, they will like leap up on the beach and grab a seal and drag him under the water and eat him. That's one of the best whale things to see in a nature documentary. Everyone loves it, but don't think it happens all over the world. Just in some places. In other places, like in Antarctica, the whales and the same species of seal, they hunt fish together. They're like friends. They're collaborators in the act of getting food. They've evolved a different relationship, a different way to live. So those orcas learn from their parents and others that the seals are our friends. We don't eat them. We go hunt fish together. It's a different culture. And humans have many things like that, as you know. One kind of ritual, one kind of behavior, totally acceptable in one culture. Another says, oh my God, that is just not what we do.
Let's listen to an excerpt of David Rothenberg's Dreaming Slow, featuring Lembe Locke from Nightingales in Berlin. When it comes to animal song, do all animals sing, or is it specific species that sing?
Well, every species is a world into itself with its own aesthetic or its own lack of aesthetic. Some have developed learned songs like nightingales, mockingbirds, house finches, and others like penguins, many species of penguins. They don't learn their song, but they're born with an ability to make just a certain sound different from every other penguin. And so the parents can find their children and the mates can find each other, but they don't learn. They just kind of evolve. They can make a sound like or. They don't have choice about that. They just can do that. And the song that they were born with the ability of making, they use that in very specific individual ways. So you're right. Yes. Some species are more musical than others. Some individuals in each species are more musical than others in the same species, just like people.
Besides humans and animals in the wild, are there other species who sing together?
Oh, many. There's both many groups of animals, like flocks of birds that all sing together. So they're not using the song to attract a mate, kind of male, performance, advertisement, how great they are. That happens, but also they sometimes all sing together just for the joy of it, or through the building of a collective energy. Like spring peepers, many frogs. It's like a whole orchestra of frogs. One scientific study showed that the female frogs would prefer if they could just meet one male frog making his one song alone. Boop, boop, boop. But no, they have to go to these big frog rave discos where hundreds of frogs are all singing together. They have no choice. It's like the person who doesn't really want to go to the club, but that's the only place they think they could find a mate before we had, dating apps. You just have to go. The frogs just have to go. You risk being run over by a car, being smushed, stepped upon by the hoofs of a moose. You just have to go. There's no choice. But if they've managed to find one frog alone, they would be so much happier.
You've developed a practice of making music with animals. So when you're playing with an animal, how are you determining whether it's actually interacting with you?
Well, it's kind of like playing with human jazz musicians. You have no clue what these people are thinking. You don't even know, are they on the same planet as you? But maybe together you make a music none of you could make alone. That being said, there's one famous study of nightingales, which identified three different strategies. The nightingales in Berlin, which has a lot of nightingales and a lot of scientists, three different strategies they can use. When nightingales first arrive, they're establishing their territories, which are very localized. They try and interrupt each other all the time. So one starts going, and the other trying to jam the signal, gets on top of that one. And then once they've established the territories, they go back and forth like, and then back and forth. They leave space for each other. Like they're just acknowledging, I'm here and you're there. I'm here, you're there. And then there's a third kind of nightingale that just couldn't care less what anyone else is doing. It just sings as if no one else is around, like as if so enamored with his own song. Like, it's so beautiful. Am I not so great today? Oh, are you singing too? I'm sorry, I didn't notice. And any jazz musician could tell you that these three types of musicians are found on any bandstand all over the world.
So if you, for example, went into a situation playing with a nightingale, do you have those licks in mind of like, those are the kinds of sounds that this animal makes, and I'm going to approach it differently than if I was performing with a whale, for example?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time playing with nightingales. I wrote a book about it. Every spring I go to Berlin and do it. I'll be there this spring in May if anyone else is there. And it's always different. And every individual is different. And some of them I know where they are. They migrate to Africa. They live about 7 years. Every year they'll come back to the exact same tree in Berlin. Can you believe that? So I know this is a good spot. There's going to be one here. Some of them are more interested in humans. Others are less interested. And it changes during the course of the courtship season. In the beginning, they're more competitive, you could say, if you believe that competition theory. There are increasingly numbers of scientists that do not, that think that the musical activity of different species is more collective, which is what I'm working on now for my next book. Why do birds sing at dawn? In fact, we haven't got a clue. We don't know. There's about 12 scientifically suggested explanations. Not one of them has enough evidence to prove it. And do they just listen to their own species at dawn, or are they listening to each other? I kind of want to find that out in a musical way. I'm not collecting a lot of data. I'm not feeding it into machine learning to have AI decide what's going on. I just want to go out and play with the birds and feel what's going on. And there is a handful of scientific research demonstrating interspecies communication in birds from one species to another. It's not just me thinking about this as some romantic musical something or other. Scientists are also increasingly interested in this. And yes, AI and machine learning can certainly help decode that experience once you consider it as data, but it's certainly not the only way.
Let's listen to an excerpt of David Rothenberg's On the Journey That Must Be from Secret Songs of Ponds. So when you're asking these kinds of questions, like why do birds sing at dawn, does that kind of observation of animal sounds tell you something different than other kinds of observations would?
What does sound tell you about human behavior? I don't know if you've seen this wonderful recent film, The History of Sound, which is like a gay love story from the 1920s. These two musicologists who are studying at the New England Conservatory, but they're really studying folk music, the kind of folk music that goes from England to America into the woods. And they have this wonderful connection that then they spend the rest of their lives trying to recover. What was that feeling? And the whole film is sonically beautiful, just like anybody who is really sensitive to sound, a musician or otherwise, uses this sense in an intense, really visceral way. that can be hard to describe. Right. Okay. So you might look at a bird, look at a cardinal. They're red. They're red. They have really bright, kind of pointy heads. They're named cardinals, like what you see in the Vatican or something. And they're incredibly red. The song is incredibly rhythmic, like pew, 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 pew. And it's a whole different thing. And the males and females both sing, showing that our standard prejudice, assuming only the males are performing, the females are assessing with their finely honed aesthetic sense what's good and bad, that actually in cardinals they're singing together, which is less common in the bird world, but it's happening. You don't get that kind of information unless you listen to them. One study has been done with cardinals, pew, pew, pew. It's a very pure electronic-y kind of sound, like a slew, like something a synthesizer could make. One study played synthesized versions of this sound to cardinals, and they were so excited. They really got into it. And this sort of got the sense that maybe inside the brain of a cardinal is something like a Platonic ideal. Like Plato said, we have forms inside our brains. We can't draw a perfect circle, but we know what it is. So the cardinal hears a perfect sound, more perfect than any real sonic being could make. And thinks, oh my God, this is it. The same kind of thing some people feel when they hear electronic music. The pure sine wave is more pure and more perfect than a flute, which has some irregularity. Other people say the pure electronic sound is dead, it's artificial. But the notion of purity is something that goes on in the brains of animals as well as humans. In the minds of animals, which may be not just in the brain, but in their whole body, it's well documented that most birds cannot make their sounds without also moving. So bird dance is as important as bird song.
We've talked a lot about birds, but do you have any other favorite animals that you like playing with?
Yeah, I've played a lot with humpback whales. They have the longest song in the animal world. They could sing for 24 hours. I mean, they're repeating something, but they keep going. And you spend time with a humpback whale, it slows you down. Recently, I did something I always wanted to do, just play one whale song for an hour, have people lie on the floor, see if they get into it. And it was very interesting. It's kind of profound. Not what everyone expected. The song is not entirely pure, melodic, mournful. It has noises, it has scratches, but you have to slow down your sense of structure to take it in. And animals operate at very different time scales. From the very quick, birds can hear 5 times faster than we do, according to some studies. And, a fin whale can make one pulse, like 32 hertz, lower than that. And then another one, it's 3 minutes later. And they're so accurate that if you speed up what they're doing, you get. Can they actually hear it as a beat? Are they dancing to one pulse every 3 minutes? It's pretty crazy. But then again, not as crazy as the 17-year cicada that is like, they all emerge. This happens only in the eastern US. You're not going to find them in California, I'm afraid. And then they all sing, fly, mate, and die. Then they're underground. The nymphs kind of slowly live and grow underground. They live for 17 years, and they prepare. They're counting. Their bodies are like, they're not thinking about this. They just register 17 changes in temperature, and then they all emerge together. So that's like the longest beat, the longest rest in the animal world. It's kind of like if you're playing, bass clarinet in a Broadway show, and you have to sit there for 25 minutes and then go boo, and then you go back to reading your book, and then after 25 minutes, another sound. So, but think of doing it for 17 years, and these animals can count a lot better than we can. I couldn't count for 17 years.
You'll be giving the West Coast premiere of your piece, 11 Paths to Animal Music, at the Nature of Music in Berkeley. And this piece includes field recordings, which you've made on your travels. What are you listening for when making field recordings and deciding how to bring them into a composition?
For this piece, I listen for something different than in the past. The piece is made of short, what I consider short, field recordings. Each one's about a minute in length, and there's some space between them. They're all ambiguous. They're all field recordings where you can't always tell what's going on. The first one's the most remarkable in a way. It's a kind of bird called the sora imitating frogs. And I heard it, I had no idea what it was. It took a long time to figure this out. And maybe I'm making it up, that maybe I'm wrong about this, but listening to sora recordings, listening to these frogs, that's what seems to be going on. It sounds like a kind of mutant frog. Out of the sea of frogs, one is adding more stuff in a totally different way that fits in. So there's some interspecies communication right there. The second track is in the south of France, in the Camargue, on a very windy day, creaking trees and nightingales singing, like during the day, with this beautiful sort of wind kind of sound world around you. Let's see, there's another one, the sound of a death's head hawk moth. It's the most alien sound in there. And at the very end, I'm not going to tell you what it is, except you hear a strange beast arrive in the midst of a dawn chorus of birds. Birds that sound like aliens already, like, what? And so the score involves looking at the sonograms and has instructions for how any ensemble of musicians should interact with this. So it's a kind of graphic score and a text score as well that can be performed in many different ways by different ensembles. I think this is the first time I'm performing it alone, and that'll be interesting, yeah.
And the title of the piece, 11 Paths to Animal Music, to me suggests a sort of guide on how to listen differently to the sounds of the natural world. So what are you hoping that listeners leave the performance with?
Well, the title comes from a chapter in my book, Nightingales in Berlin, where people are always asking me, what do you do? How do I do this? So I decided, against my better judgment, to write a kind of manifesto. And I thought it should be 11 because of Spinal Tap, the great work of the late Rob Reiner, essential film for all who care about music. So it goes up to 11, and they're not rules; they're paths. Like, you can go this way, or you can go that way, and ignore my paths. Make your own path. And so they say things like, "Don't be the center of attention. If your own music doesn't change, you're not listening hard enough. Is it possible that listening is forgetting the name of the thing one hears? Don't be fixated on what it is, but how and what is the sound doing? Things like that. I'm paraphrasing here. I don't remember all the paths, but the idea is it's like a guide. So you read the guide, you listen to these sounds, then you have a way to make music in tandem with them.
Oh, I think that's a good place to end. Do you have anything else that you want to add?
Thanks so much to Other Minds for inviting me. I've always wanted to be part of your amazing series of concerts. I'm so happy. This is happening at the David Brower Center. And once I had to open for David Brower at Green Mountain College in Vermont, and his plane was late. Like, we don't know when he was going to show up. It was like a stand-up comedy routine. I had to keep going, come up with something else to say. Let's play another whale song. Let's play more. And then when he got there, he gives this impassioned talk he would always give, what John McPhee called the sermon in Encounters with the Archdruid. But he had added something that wasn't in the original sermon. He said, "I got an email from John Muir last night." And then I asked him later, "What were you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, really, a guy named John Muir has been sending me emails for months. I really had to find out what's going on."
Great. Well, thank you so much, David, for talking with me today.
Thanks a lot.
You can hear David Rothenberg speak and perform at The Nature of Music on Thursday, April 16th, 2026 at 7:30 p.m. at the David Brower Center in Berkeley. Thank you, David, for joining me today, and thanks everyone for listening. This has been an episode of the Other Minds podcast, brought to you by Other Minds. Our 30th festival is October 8th to 11th, 2026 at the Brava Theater in San Francisco. We'll be back soon with more interviews with the festival composers and more.